Every now and then, I like to bring on an expert. And what do I mean by an expert? I mean Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report. He's literally a cap expert. He literally hosts a class and seminar teaching others about the salary cap, about transactions in the NBA, about veteran minimums and the maximum amounts players can earn, all the details when it comes to money. Eric Pincus is an expert at. We're talking Warriors. We're talking the future of the team, what their flexibility is this year, their chances in the Western Conference. We're going to cover a lot of bases. Come join the party. It's the Golden Days.
They always find something to nitpick, and that's because there's expectations for us to win. It was a pretty crazy night.
Let's go. In a minute, I'ma need a sentimental man or woman to pump me up. Come on and break me off. Cause I get what I want and I like what I see.
We're talking Warriors. Thank you for joining the Golden Days. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads and Instagram at DogWild, over on Twitter at Surf Journalist. The program is on all social media platforms at Golden Days Pod. Before we're joined by Eric, let's first give some love to the official sponsor of Golden Days, and that's BetOnline. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting, every stat, matchup breakdown, even live odds and spreads to bet on during games, with the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, Major League Baseball playoffs, NHL, the NBA, which is almost here, to political props. You can bet on the election. When the game's over, kick back, put your feet up, pour yourself a stiff one, light them up if you got them, create that casino ambiance, and join BetOnline's online casino to get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. An absolute pleasure to have Bleacher Report's Eric Pincus join us. You can follow Eric on Twitter and Threads at Eric Pincus. And I'm sure there's other platforms that he will happily enlighten all of us on. Eric, such a pleasure to see you again. You've got a sports seminar coming up, more specifically a free webinar enlightening the audience about rookie and veteran extensions, final roster decisions. That's going to take place October 21st of this month. Check out sportsbusinessclassroom.com to visit with Eric, with Bobby Marks, and so much more. Great to see you, Eric. How are you doing? Absolutely. And describe your class. Like what can people expect for this free webinar? I love the word free.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you as well. I'm excited. I'm going to what day is it today? Was it Wednesday, Thursday? It's Thursday. I don't know what day it is, but I get it. That's a normal thing, to be honest. It helps when we're in season because I sort of know like when the games are. You know what I mean? But I'm going to Clippers tonight. My first time I'll be at the new arena. I've actually been to the new arena, but the first time I'll see a game there. But Bobby and I work together in Sports Business Classroom. You should all know Bobby Marks from ESPN. And he is the lead instructor of our program. I'm the general manager. And together we put on this wonderful summer program year round. We work together, and just sometimes we'll just like, hey, like, okay, the season's starting. What's happening? And so for us, we have a very salary cap centric point of view of the league. So what are the decisions teams have to make before the season starts? And there is a deadline, and that deadline is the 21st. For veteran extensions, just for players who have multi-year deals. So someone like Brandon Ingram is eligible through June 30th. So he's not someone on this list. But there are players who have multiple years left, and De'Aaron Fox, for instance. He can extend, but he can't extend after October 21st. And then also the rookie scale players. Good example would be Jalen Green or Alperen Şengün.
Or how about the Warriors? Well, Jonathan Kuminga.
Kuminga, yes. Right? Let's bring that to the topic at hand. Jonathan Kuminga is a huge one. And so we don't know the answer today, but we will know the answer, or should know the answer, as of the 21st. And so Bobby and I will talk about, and then also who got cut at the end. Sometimes there's like a very last minute trade just to get teams to where they want to be. There was a great one a couple years ago where like the Thunder and Rockets traded 8 players and then they cut all 8. Like both teams cut everybody. But for us, that's like, we geek out on that, Bobby and I. But for the casual user or viewer to sort of try to understand why these things happen, what goes into these decisions. Sports business classroom, really the goal is to try to help people who want to get into the business of basketball. And so we work really closely with students. I work with students literally like every day, just talking hoops, and they help me with some of my material, trying to analyze some of these nonsense things I write and have some fun with it. So yeah, if you want to join the free webinar, I think all you have to do is just like sign up. They ask for your email. You get a link for probably a Zoom, and that's that. So, and we'll send you maybe a couple of emails now and then to say, hey, we have a program coming up. But there's no charge to it, just to let you get an idea of what we like to do. And if you love to geek out on basketball, I mean, if you're watching the show, you probably like to geek out on basketball, and maybe the Warriors are where you're geeking out specifically. My point of view on that is that if you're a Warriors fan or any fan of any team, you need to know what's going on with the other 29 teams to make your team better. Like the Warriors don't operate in a vacuum. If they want to make a trade, they can't trade with themselves, right? So that's my point of view. So if you want to better understand the league, you better understand how your favorite team fits into that puzzle.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And again, this is a free webinar. You and Bobby and a team of other instructors and teachers host the summer class. Sorry about my dog going crazy right now, which is held in Vegas annually right around Summer League. So the fact that this is free, I might even sign up. I mean, there's so much nuance to this, Eric, that the fact that you're educating, anyone for free is awesome, in my opinion. Let's start while we are on the topic of Kuminga and Moody and these deadlines. Could you enlighten the audience and myself on what the deadline is if the Warriors and those 2 players would hypothetically sign an extension? There is a deadline for that. And in your opinion, like, it looks like that's not going to happen. It looks like the Warriors are going to play the season out. So 2-part question. What's the deadline? And in your opinion, like, what are the positives and negatives to the team playing this out this year and waiting till next offseason, which is likely what's going to happen?
The negative is more for the player than the team. Like, from my point of view, like, okay, the worst case scenario for the team is that the player blows up so big that a team with cap room issues them an offer sheet that is more than what they can sign a player for now. So if you can get Kuminga for, let's say you can sign him right now for $25 million a year. I'm just making up a number. And he goes out and murders the season. They don't sign him to that. And the Nets, this is the challenge. There's only 2 or 3 teams that really have money. The Nets, the Wizards, like the Rockets can get to money, but they have to like let go of Fred VanVleet. There's a long list of teams that can kind of get there, but most of the teams won't go under the cap. So what's the real risk? Also, very few teams that go under the cap chase restricted free agents, because why use your flexibility to go after a player that you don't get when you can get players that you can get without any interference, and there's a waiting period, right? You sign someone on, you could technically sign someone on the 1st of July, but the clock doesn't, to a restricted free agent offer sheet. The offer sheet clock doesn't start until the 6th, which is a moratorium. So as of the 6th, then in this case, the Warriors would have a couple of days to decide. So if you're the Nets, you have this money. Are you going to wait until the 6th and then the 8th to find out? Meanwhile, on July 1st, or really June, even at the draft, most of the decisions are being made. And so like by July 2nd, all these agreements are done. Now they can't be executed until the 6th, but by July 2nd, like 75% of like the big moves are done. Or that's a made up number, but so
I know, yeah.
Do you use your cap room if you're the Nets to go chasing somebody who you don't get? And then when you don't get that person, the opportunities to use your cap space are diminished because the teams have already made their decisions. The better players have made their decisions. Now, there are some teams that are very patient, and the rebuilding teams like the Nets, maybe it's worthwhile for them to do that. That's the risk for the Warriors, is that someone, but I mean, and certainly the Wizards or a couple other teams might, and like the year that the Knicks got Jalen Brunson, they didn't have cap room at this stage. They didn't project to have cap room. So it's possible that one of the teams that they're not on the list, but usually it takes one of the other teams with cap room to absorb contracts. So like the Knicks dumped some players on teams like, you probably think San Antonio or whatever, like they got out of money. I'd have to go back and look to be able to. So if the Knicks got out of money, it was somebody else who had cap room. The point is that it's more of a reshuffling. So like, fine, the Nets don't go for Kuminga, someone else does, but they need the Nets to take on stuff from them to even be able to do that. And it's like, what are the odds that the Warriors are going to face an offer sheet for Kuminga? That's the reality. It's a very team-centric rule. Agents and the NBPA don't like any of this. They don't, if they could change how the rules are, they would. But it's always collective bargaining is a give and a take. What's more important to the players? How often is restricted free agency a problem? It's not enough of an issue that they stake like this, we're going to go to war over this. And so, yeah, I think for the Warriors, there's no real reason to rush. Like, see who the players are. Now, with someone like Moody, you can argue like, hey, if you can lock him in at like 10 million, 11, 12 million now, and if you really believe that the kid is going to be like the guy in your rotation to step in with Clay gone, and like, yeah, they got Buddy and they got, Kyle Anderson, they have other players that they brought in, but if they, Melton, whatnot, but if they feel like Moody is the guy underneath the radar and you can lock him in, this is similar to maybe what Boston did last year with Peyton Pritchard. They gave him a very team-friendly deal, and his deal starts at this year. It actually it kicks in, and so looking at Pritchard, he's at $7 million a year. Well, starting $7 million, so it ramps up, but that's like nothing, right? So when you look at it from that point of view, if you can get Moody at a really team-friendly number, you got to do it. But that's the challenge. Will he take that, or will he bet on himself? So there's a number somewhere where they can find a compromise, and maybe that number's in the $12-13 million range. You can argue that if they can get him at that number, do so, but like no one is going to have more than maybe 14 to offer, because again, no one's going to have any cap room. And if teams, they have a mid-level exception for those that could offer, it's 14-ish million. Are they going to use that on Moody? So these are the debates that the Warriors would have internally, and they don't have a rush. They can take their time. The player, for them, like getting that money locked in 5-6 years. And if you're talking, let's say it's 25 million a year for Kuminga over 5 years, and we're talking, 125 to 150 million or higher.
You win the lottery. You won the lottery.
That's really hard to turn away. Now, if he waits, he might be able to get more. He might not get more. And so your job as a team is to sort of play that leverage against them. Like, fine, you can wait, but like, it's crazy money that you're turning away. But like Emmanuel quickly turned it away from the Knicks, something similar. And he wanted like 25 million a year. They wanted to do 20. This is what at least I had heard as far as intel. And they said, all right, nah. And then they looked and said, all right, well, we're not going to invest in this guy at this price. We'll trade him. And then he ended up going over to the Raptors, and now he's making 32.5 flat. So for him, waiting was the right move because he got way more than what the Knicks were going to offer, which was like around 20 a year. So that's kind of the, if you're not going to extend Kuminga Moody, you're either one, not going to pay them and you're going to look to trade them, or you are going to pay them and you're going to just do it on the team's pace because the player really doesn't have the leverage. So that's kind of the whole debate in a nutshell. And someone has to give somewhere, like take less than what they think or give more than what they think or whatever. And that's going to happen, or it's not going to happen. And we'll know in about a week or less than a week.
And just to add a little more context to that, just for the audience who's unfamiliar. So Kuminga and Moody at the end of this upcoming season, their fourth year, if an offer is not given and the extension is not agreed to, they'll be restricted free agents or the teams they present a tendered offer, right, at a set amount, and if the players accept that, then they play the 5th year and then become unrestricted free agents after that. I have all that correct?
It's called the technical term would be a qualifying offer. So the required tender is when you draft somebody, you have to give them an offer, a very usually like second round picks. You give them like a non-guaranteed offer at a baseline required tender just to keep their lives. So you do have to issue a qualifying offer. It's before July, and so like you don't extend Kuminga. You're the Warriors. You don't extend and Moody. And so by the end of June, you issue them a qualifying offer. So that offer is a scale amount based on, especially for rookie scale, but even for second round picks and other undrafted players, there is a scale. It's 135% of their expiring contract. But in the case of Kuminga, his qualifying offer would be 10.2 and Moses Moody's would be 8.1. I'd have to check.
Good knowledge. Good knowledge.
I'd have to check where they stand. Let's see. I haven't run the. I think it's 8.7.
It's Eric. It's okay. The picture's
it changes
clear.
if they start. If they reach certain criteria, their numbers change a little bit. But let's call it between $8 and $10 million for these dudes. And so they could take those 1-year deals. That's the alternative. And then they're unrestricted the next year. And if that happens, then you're probably going to lose them.
Yeah, exactly. And you rarely see that for the reason you just said, because the player, the team will likely lose the player if it gets that far. You're getting nothing back in return. What I'm curious about, Eric, and we'll get back to the Warriors in just a second here. Kuminga and Moody's draft class had players like Cade Cunningham, Franz Wagner, Scotty Barnes, who each got max extensions, yet they're very unproven players, man. I mean, I know they've shown glimpses, but the consistency hasn't been there yet. The numbers haven't been there yet. Why would the teams give them that much money when they didn't have to?
Yeah. True. Yeah. So like there's different philosophies, obviously, right?
Okay.
So one of the philosophies is in the case of Wagner, like he's their guy, Paolo and him, they make up the core of their team, just like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. The Celtics paid them more than they had to. They gave them these supermax contracts or extensions that no one else could give. Like the Celtics could say, we'll max you out, but we're not going to pay you more than anyone else can pay you. And that's not how they did it, because those are their guys. They just won a championship with those guys. They did it with Jaylen before they won the championship. And so from the point of view of like, we believe in you, we are going to pay you the most we possibly can so that you feel good about where you're at. And that's kind of what you're seeing with Wagner, who helped them get to the playoffs, is an important guy. Like I could say, like, he can't really shoot well. And with Paolo, you need a shooter next to Paolo. So like there might be some fit issues long term. The Magic aren't concerned about that, clearly. And so the argument also is that the cap is going to climb 10% a year each year in this CBA. Not because of the CBA itself, but because of the TV deal, the broadcast deal is coming in. And so it's limited to 10%. It would actually go higher if it wasn't for the CBA rules that kind of cap it at a certain amount. So in theory, their raises are going to be 8% a year. The cap's going at 10%. Like the cap will outpace, their contracts will get better over time. I still feel like I don't know. I've never been in the position to be with a team and say like, this is, I'm going to hold fast to this and not pay you what I don't have to pay you, but we'll pay you the most that, that we can, that makes sense for us so we can have a great team. But like the Pistons, it's a little bit more of a wild card where like they've been lousy every year forever, or at least, for the last however many years, they've won like no playoff games in like a decade or something like that. And so you can argue like, what's your point of like over investing? And these players have like super max potential where like if they are named to all NBA first, second, third team, MVP of the league, defensive player of the year, their money will jump. And so my argument is like, why over invest in them? But then the counter is like, hey, if they win MVP of the league, we want that, that's good. If they win defensive player of the year, that's great. If they're an all NBA player, that means Cade had a great year. It probably means our team was better. So, most guys who get those supermax potential don't actually qualify. And so, but then Ben Simmons got it, and then he did qualify, and then immediately had back issues and personality issues with the team.
Yep.
So it backfires pretty badly. Trey got it. He earned extra money, and the Hawks have not been particularly good. And they're over-invested in Trey a bit. So it backfires on teams all the time. So I don't have an answer other than it just seems like, some teams are just the Warriors here, they're not doing that. They're not saying you're our guy, we're just going to pay you whatever. Clearly. However, well, we don't know. We have a week, so maybe it is. But you're taking care of those guys day one, the very first chance you get. And last year it was Halliburton got that, and Anthony Edwards got that. I could understand those a little bit better, but I mean, you could have made the same argument Halliburton's great, but his team hasn't done anything, and now his team did do something. They were really, really good. So the Pistons look at that and say, "We'll do the same thing." Is it the right thing to do? I don't know. There's no right or wrong is when you're. You can in a few years.
Yeah.
And if your GM or the basketball decision maker, whatever their title is, if they get fired after a year or two or 3 or 4 years from the decision, then you're okay, maybe it was a bad decision. We could say that the Ben Simmons decision was not a good decision. But,
fair.
As a team, you make the best decision you can in the moment you can, usually with the owner of a team, maybe throwing his weight into or her weight into the decision. And they may not be good decisions, and you just sort of have to live with those choices that you're pushed into. That happens too. So, I look at some decisions and I go, I don't like it. I don't love Clay in Dallas. I didn't like that move.
Same. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money they threw at him. And I personally like the idea of, especially in the Warriors case, that like you said, they have the leverage. Why not just wait? Why not let these two young players have the added incentive of playing for the extension? Because we've also seen some individuals get those contracts and then complacency kicks in, because that's so much money, man. I mean, you could just completely flail and be set for life, regardless of what happens. So it's the character of the individual, I think, in my opinion, comes into play as well. And we're joined by Eric Pincus here. Again, you can follow him on all social media platforms at Eric Pincus. It's super easy. He's got a sports webinar, a webinar coming up pertaining to rookie veteran extensions, more specifically an NBA webinar. And let me share that real fast, the poster for that. So folks watching this on YouTube can get informed in case you missed it at the very beginning. The website for that to sign up, sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Eric, you wrote an article recently for Bleacher Report. It was a hypothetical trade proposal. And correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine those kinds of stories drive traffic. People love reading these scenarios. And you focused on the Warriors getting Jimmy Butler in a 4-team trade. Two-part question, if you don't mind answering.
Of course.
One, do you like the idea of Jimmy Butler to the Warriors? And two, for the folks who haven't read the article, what would the Warriors have to give up for a player like Jimmy Butler?
Well, so the big picture question for Jimmy Butler and Miami is that he's going into the last year of his contract. He does have a player option, and he's extension eligible. Okay, so, and he's expensive, right? Jimmy Butler this year is about almost 49 million. Next year he has a $52.4 million option. He would, I haven't talked to him, but from what my intel is that he would like to opt out or void that. And based on his age, he can add 2 additional years. So you're talking about basically locking in another 50 something on top of that for 26, 27. So that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, you're Jimmy Butler, you have about 100 million guaranteed. You would like to have 150 million guaranteed instead. That would, and those are not exact numbers, but those are like the gist of it, right? So the Heat at this time aren't open to that. And it's one of those things where he is definitely their guy. He's been their guy. He got them to the finals twice, but he hasn't been as available in terms of health. And it's also a team that he is like, without Jimmy, they're just an average team. They're not like, he makes them an NBA Finals team, and that's not to diminish. Like Bam Adebayo is an Olympian and a great player, and Tyler Hero can score. And I really like Jaquez, UCLA guy,
Same.
one of the best rookies last year. Jovic is showing like he can play. So like they're in a good direction. Also, Spoelstra is probably the best coach in the league, so they're always going to overperform. And yet they're not like a contender without Jimmy. And then also they're like a second tier contender. They can get to the finals, but they're not a team that can win a title. So how long do the Heat want to stay on this path? And if there's a reasonable, like, again, we talked about how there's no cap room earlier. So it's the Wizards and the Nets aren't going to give Jimmy Butler money. So it's in Jimmy's interest to get to the team via trade that can pay him and is willing to pay him. And that list is going to be a short list because of his age, based on who he is. He has I would say, unique personality. Like, he's not for everyone, his personality. I happen to like Jimmy Butler's personality, but like, I get that he's not for everyone, right? He's an acquired taste.
The history speaks for itself, right? I mean, would you agree that his history speaks for itself? That's all I wanted to add. That's all I added to that. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
Do I have you still?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And in the case, yes, I think you dropped for a second, but let me know if I'm dropping at all.
You're good. No, you're good. You're perfect.
But I think the way to look at it, hold on one second. I'm going to close. I just closed something that I think was eating some resources. Okay. So in the case of Jimmy, he is a ready to win player right now. He's a good defender when healthy. And if you put him on a team that doesn't need him to be the cornerstone of the team every night, then I think you can pace him a little bit better. So if you're putting him with Steph Curry and the many pieces that Draymond Green, who, like, man, I mean, that would be, if you're playing a team where in the playoffs, you've got to deal with the defense of Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. That's a lot. That's a lot to handle in terms of toughness. I think Melton's a really nice, solid defender. And I think, they can fill in and you can improve the team defensively with, the challenges is that you have to give up depth to get Jimmy. And so that's where, like, I get presented. Well, first of all, when, I don't write for traffic, but I know that my people paying my salary at Bleacher, like, I came up with an idea like a couple of years ago where it was like, hey, there are all these point guards that might get traded at the deadline. It was like Chris Paul, Mike Conley, D'Angelo Russell, Russell Westbrook. There was like a long list of guys, and a lot of them did get moved. And so I was just playing with, like, hey, I could kind of see like a 4-team trade where this could all sort of make sense. And I was just messing around, came up with something, pitched it to my editors, and they're like, yeah, go ahead and write it. So I wrote it, and the numbers were bonkers in terms of views. If you imagine, our app has like an NBA stream, but it also has team streams. So it's
and just to add to that, Eric, the Bleacher Report app, I only recently downloaded it. It's an awesome app, dude. Like, they have community pages for every team. So you have the fan bases debating and sharing news items. It's its own little entity that's exploded. I'm pleased with it, man. I want to give your company props for that. So
appreciate it. Yeah. So I wrote that, and it did well. So then, like, a month or so later, they're like, hey, you mind doing another one? And so I did another one, and it did really well. And so, like, gradually they worked it into like my regular content, where I'm doing a couple of those a month, sort of like multi-team trade. And the reason I do that is that the league in and of itself is complicated, and the way that the rules are have gotten harder. It's not a good or a bad thing, but they are harder and easier to make trades in different ways. It's easier for teams below certain salary levels to make trades. It's harder for higher salary teams to make trades. Therefore, they need a little bit of help often from the teams that are not high salary teams to facilitate a trade. And so we are seeing more and more multi-team trades. And a lot of times it's just a team jumping in on a very minor way. And so what this concept was Jimmy at the heart of it would be Wiggins and Kuminga. Okay. So the idea is like, salary wise, it's got to be Wiggins right off the bat, just to make the money work. You're not going to get anywhere close to that without his big salary. Now, Wiggins was huge the year that they won the title, was a starter in the All-Star game. And then the next year was good, almost as good statistically, but he had some family stuff and wasn't around a lot. And then the next year he was around more, but his production dipped down to like 13 a game. Still a really good player, but I can argue you're upgrading in terms of championship readiness in Jimmy Butler. Now, if you don't agree with that, then don't agree with that. And
No,
don't,
I agree with that.
Oh, no,
I'm
not
with
you.
you.
I'm saying to the listener, like if the listener doesn't agree and they don't want Jimmy over Wiggins, then forget about it, right? Because you're not going to want.
The Wiggins part of it is what people would disagree with. I think it's the Kuminga part. Yeah.
And so this is where it gets, like this is the decision for the Warriors. If this was available, are you a win now team where you're going to do everything you can to win right now and therefore not worry about what Kuminga might grow into? Because they know he's a good basketball. The debate isn't, is he a good basketball player? Is he someone that if he's one of your top 1 or 2 or 3 best players, will you win a championship with Kuminga? And if the answer from the Warriors' point of view is no, not during Steph's run, then and maybe the price that Kuminga's people are demanding is too high, then you do this. And I constructed this to be done before the season, before the extension deadline, so that Miami can negotiate and give Kuminga something, and for them to take on Wiggins but get out of Jimmy. They immediately, number one, get out of the luxury tax, so they make they save a ton of money because it's not just the tax. They're going to get call it 15 million kickback for being under. So you look at all the numbers, and even if you're paying Wiggins the next year, if you're Miami, 28 plus he has a player option the year after for 30, it's money that the Warriors are getting out of. And then you're extending Jimmy at the most you can, but his contract expires the same year as Steph and the same year as Draymond, assuming Draymond opts in. Then you're basically saying for the next 3 years, we are going to be, if you're the Warriors, Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, role players around that. And you're not trading Podziemski. You're not trading Moses Moody in this deal. So you're still able to keep some depth. You're not trading the newcomers. But
you have a lot of depth. A lot.
Yeah, you're not trading Melton. You're not trading Anderson. You're not trading
you're not trading Moody. It sounds
you're not trading Waters, by the way, who's been really good. You're not trading Jackson Davis. So, but you do have to include other pieces just to make the numbers work. Now, the challenge is for the Warriors, this is the real challenge, is actually getting back to 14 players because they have a hard cap at the first apron. The first apron is basically a voluntary hard cap where the team said when they made the moves that they made, when they brought in Melton, when they brought in Anderson and Buddy, we agree as the Warriors that we will not spend this year over the first apron. The first apron is $178.1 million. They are currently, including Looney's unlikely incentive, at $177.6. They are about $533,000 below that mark, $534 below that mark. And so they can't add salary. And then as we make this trade, this theoretical trade, and they're sending out 4 or 5 dudes to bring back like 1 or 2 dudes, I have to look at I'll go back to what I wrote. They have to get back to 14 players, which is the minimum. And that was the real challenge. So the trade itself had Jimmy, and I actually included the Celtics in this. And there was a very specific reason. And it doesn't have to be the Celtics. And it probably needs to be another team or a second trade that the Warriors make. But there's a tax reason why you need to have recently drafted players, because they'll only count as like 1.2 million against the cap and the tax and the aprons. Versus like if you just sign some random dude for a rookie minimum, like they've signed you up and you're getting the minimum because they just got to have a body. You're still going to count at like 2 million or 2.1 million against their tax and aprons. Whereas if it's recently drafted player, then it's only 1.2. So they need to, so I have them trading for a 2-way player on the Celtics and converting that player to a rookie minimum, just like, and they're also going to convert Post, who is their 2-way.
Correct.
It doesn't matter if he plays a game. You need a body. It's kind of like Santos last year. You need a body. You convert them. And so, and then I actually have them needing one more. Now, if you did this trade later in the year, it's easier to do because you could sign a guy for a prorated minimum. They may only be 700,000 in mid to late February. So there are, and it's also, if you included Moody right now, it's a lot easier to do. But I didn't want to just throw away Moses Moody because I want to make a Jimmy Butler trade happen. Right. So you have to be sensible and do something that is semi-realistic. The premise, The Warriors are willing to trade Kuminga and Wiggins for Jimmy, and the Heat are willing to take those two guys for Jimmy. There's no draft picks directly in that transaction. That's the premise. How would that work in the rules? I did an article recently before Steph extended, which was like, how theoretically could he join the Lakers and LeBron? And again, these are exercises in looking at the rules and making sense of like, okay, how does this work within the rules so that people can have a better, that's my point of view. How can people have a better understanding? I'm not saying
these rules, I mean, you're just, Eric, sorry to interrupt, but there's so much nuance and little like variations, little rules. There's so many of them that unless you have your level of expertise, I don't think you can write an article like this. So it's crazy.
Well, I mean, and people want to know. I mean, they really like, they're like, they want to know it, like if you're a Lakers fan, you want to know, hey, like Steph is flirting with the Lakers and LeBron after Team USA. Like, how do we get him? If you're a Lakers fan, if you're a Warriors fan, if you love Jimmy Butler and think this is a great thing, it's like, okay, well, how would that happen? And then again, like from the point of view of my role at Bleacher Report and Sports Business Classroom, I view it as sort of like I have a certain amount of knowledge and experience. I have a lot of people hitting me up saying, can they do this? Whether it's like an uncle, a friend, like people text me, people on Twitter, whatever, social media, like people just ask me because they know I know stuff. Right or wrong, I know certain things. I don't know everything, but I know certain things. And I know this. I don't know whether they'll do it. But if you say,
and I'm one of those guys, just for the record, I have texted you for the same reason. I'm like, Eric, what is going on here?
Well, if you're saying the teams are willing to do that, that's the premise. What now? And so, I have these assignments. I go to my editors and say, okay, this is what I came up with, and they go for it. It includes the Warriors. I'm sure they're thrilled. For me, it's just like, one of our writers actually wrote like a dream targets for a bunch of teams, and he had Jimmy Butler as like a dream target for the Warriors. So I'm like, okay, well, is that even possible? I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is how I would do it. The solution to making this all work is the Pistons, and the Pistons have cap room right now, and especially if they let go of Paul Reed, who has not been a standout for them. Like, I don't know if the Pistons love Paul Reed or don't. They may think that there's more to it. He hasn't shot well for them. Doesn't look like he has a big role. If they let him go, and by the way, they could let him go and re-sign him too. So it's not like it's not possible that they can keep Paul Reed anyway. But they would get Looney and Gary Payton the second. So it does hurt some depth. Now, Looney historically has been a huge part of why the Warriors won. But you can argue, just like with Clay, that his durability and his productivity is dipped enough that you could say, all right, if you're the Warriors, we have to pivot, and they do. You also have Trace Jackson Davis in that role that is probably ahead of what Looney does, and you also have you'll always have Draymond who can play center.
And just to add to that, Eric, Looney's been a topic on this program largely because defensively it's become a problem. Like, he cannot guard Jokic, Anthony Davis, any of these elite bigs. They're just scoring at will over him.
Right.
So I think he would be, and GP2, I'm glad you mentioned him as well, because I don't think he's the same guy he was 2 years ago. I know Kerr loves him, but he's making a lot of money, and the Warriors have Reese Beekman on this roster who looks like can take on that role. Just to sort of interrupt.
No, of course. And like, if you believe in Moody, if you believe in Waters and what he's doing, like, and if you believe in Podziemski as not in that same like defensive role necessarily, but like when you just start going through the rotation, like, and Buddy Hield, where are the minutes for Gary Payton? Is he your backup point guard? Well, Melton is that. If Melton's starting, like Steph is kind of the backup point guard in a way in rotation, and Podziemski is a ball handling guard in a way. He's not like but the Warriors haven't really run with like a true I mean, they obviously had Chris Paul, but like historically they haven't had like a Chris Paul run the show dominating the ball. No. And that's not how, so like they have enough where I don't see, and you say like, who is the stopper at that position? Like, well, hell, I mean, if you need to put Jimmy Butler on a guard, you can put Jimmy Butler on a guard as well. You can put him on a big wing. You can put him on a guard. And if you put him in a role where Jimmy just wants to win, he's not going to be like, I need to score 28 a game, right? If you say on this team, you need to score 16 a game, and in the playoffs, we need to put you on, hell, Austin Reeves was like a problem for the Warriors in that matchup, right?
Yes, he was.
Like,
yes.
Yeah. Yes. Like, you put Jimmy Butler on Austin Reeves, it's a very different thing, right? Like Austin's a very good player, but like Jimmy's a big mean dude.
Yeah,
at the
Steve
wing
Kerr for
position.
some reason Steve Kerr likes to put Steph on Austin Reeves. I don't understand that because Austin Reeves is bigger than he looks. He's a big, good player. And to finish up on the Jimmy Butler story, just because I don't want to exhaust the audience on that topic, but his name comes up, and I don't know if that's the reason why you mentioned him. But I think Anthony Slater published a report earlier this offseason indicating that he is a player that the Warriors have looked at. There is some legitimate interest from the Warriors regarding
sure.
Jimmy Butler. My question to you to finish up on the Jimmy Butler topic, and I just don't want to waste your time, man. I'm so thankful you're here. Is it possible for the Warriors to get a player like Jimmy Butler without giving up Kuminga? Or is that just going to have to be the case given this roster?
No, I mean it's not a must. So like the money wise, Kuminga is 7.6. So you have to give up someone else making really more than that. Or, the problem is if you start, you're like, well, if you do Pajemski and Moody, like now that's a whole nother, do you want to do that instead? Like, I think you'd probably have more people. I don't know. You might have a certain number of people upset with that. But then again, you have to replace yet another guy. And as it is, it's really hard. Now, it's doable because that's 8 million, 9 million. It is more than Kuminga. Like I'd have to run the math. There are ways, but they have very strict limitations. And that's, I have them throwing in like the Hawks picks, 26 and 28 second round picks to Detroit for part of this. I have them sending out some cash. But you're getting Jimmy Butler without giving up a first, but you are giving up a valued player in Kuminga, and we could debate Wiggins and whatnot. So, like, do I think it's going to happen? This is just a story I wrote as like how it could happen. It's based on like real, like I think the Warriors have real interest in getting pieces that would make them a champion. I think they're trying to evaluate if Kuminga is that already, and based on also what he's demanding, which is that demand is right now. And if they're so far apart that they feel like it's not going to work, or maybe they're close enough that they can compromise, or they feel like they're close enough that in the next summer they'll figure out a deal, then fine. But if they feel like we're not going to reach a number now and we're not going to reach a number then you should trade him, and you should trade him now when the Heat have the opportunity to then pay him. And that, like, they're probably going to be happier getting this done now. Again, I don't even know. I know the Heat are looking at the potential of like, hey, we have like the start of a nice young team, right? With like obviously Jaquez and Ware and Jovic, but they brought in some other young guys that they're trying to make work. Who's the other kid? Larson. He's looked really solid for them. The Heat always seem to find really good talent. So
they do.
Yeah, I think it's I didn't write it from the point of view of like, I hear this is happening and this is what's going to happen.
Right.
It's more of an educational thing. It's possible. It's messy. It definitely needs to be 3 teams. And then the Warriors have to figure out how to get back to 14 players creatively. So you could do a separate deal with Boston to, get the Anton Watson. And there was, I made a list. I didn't include it. But I made a list of like all the players who are rookies who they could do instead. Let me see if I have it, because like I don't have the whole list here, but other potentials are like Tristan Newton with Indiana, Cam Spencer with Memphis, Adam Bona, Philadelphia, Huck Porty. If I'm butchering any names, I apologize. Knicks,
you're good. You're good.
With Toronto. Like there are guys who are like drafted who could fit in this specific, but like it's the only way to get back to 14 unless you're also trading Moody, or if you're doing it at a later date, but then the Pistons might not have that cap room at a later date. So, yeah. I mean, it would be great to do our webinar next week and be like, hey, I predicted this Jimmy Butler to the Warriors trade. I've had a few moves where I've written and it happened, like Pascal Siakam to the Pacers. I didn't get the exact details right. The Pacers held firm and didn't do Jarris Walker because they didn't have to. So, but I predicted that one in a similar kind of article.
And look, Eric, maybe you're not making predictions. Maybe these teams are reading your stuff and going, okay. And you never know. You never know. I mean, these are human beings. They need inspiration. I
wrote the Steph to Lakers story, and the next day they extended Steph. So people with NBA teams were texting me like, "Oh, the Warriors saw your article and we're worried," but they're joking. Like, no, like they'd been negotiating extension with Steph for a long period of time. It just happened to work out that way.
Yeah.
Have I influenced? Look, I've had some people call me up either happy or upset with something I've written, and they've taken it seriously enough to reach out to me to have a conversation. Generally speaking, I feel like what I write is I think it's received well from the point of view of somebody who is not just making up stuff to make up stuff, and that I think people understand what I'm doing.
It's not clickbait. You're not writing clickbait.
Well,
It's educational
it's subjective.
content, and
It's all subjective.
there is realism to it. You are influential, Eric. I appreciate you being humble about it, but you are. One of the Warriors' huge signings this offseason was the fact that they had a mid-level exception for the first time in the years. They used it on De'Anthony Melton, just shy of $13 million. And so far, again, this is just the preseason. I'm trying not to overreact here, but he's looked really good. He missed the last game because of reported back tightness, which is a little concerning since he missed over half the season last year because of back issues. But if he's healthy, if he's durable, it looks like a great signing. He looks like a natural fit for this team. What is the long-term prognosis with his financially for the Warriors and with Melton?
Sure.
Like, do they have his bird rights, meaning regardless of the cap situation next year, can they offer him 12.9 or in that range? How does the long-term future look for De'Anthony Melton and the Warriors?
Right, like kind of. The answer is technically yes, but there are flavors of bird rights. So they don't have full bird rights. They have non-bird rights. So they have bird rights. They just have the non-bird, which seems like that's something they don't have because they have the non-bird version, right? So you can't go by like the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. The Warriors are paying the tax this year, yet they use the non-taxpayer mid-level. So just by words, that doesn't make sense. So a lot of these things aren't named properly.
Right.
Right. Like it should be called like the non-first apron mid-level exception. The taxpayer mid-level exception should be called the non-second apron mid-level exception. And this should not be called non-bird rights. It's basically after 1 year, you have the ability to give someone a raise of 120%, or if they make the minimum, 120% of the minimum. And then if they have early bird, you can give them up to 175%, or there's an early bird number. So it's basically around the league average. It's around the mid-level exception. So in the range of 14 million or so, 13, 14 million. And so in the case of Melton, like he's at 12.8, 120% of that is 15.4. So that's what they can pay him next year. Now, looking at it from a few points, and if you have a player for 3 or more years, you do have full bird, you could pay them up to the max. So from a logistic point of view, like generally speaking, a 1-year deal is risky for a team. If the player hits, then you don't really have the means to pay them. But that's more like Malik Monk, who got like a minimum with the Lakers on a 1 year, killed it, and then got a bigger deal with Sacramento because Lakers had no means to pay him. And so like for the Warriors, generally, I don't like 1-year deals. I want a team option, a team option or a second year that's non-guaranteed. A player and an agent would want a player option on the second year so that they have the flexibility of like, okay, I'm doing 1 year. If I get hurt or if I don't live up to it, I'll get extra money because I'll be able to just opt in. If I kill it, I can opt out and go earn more. So from a player point of view, you want a player option. From a team side, you want either a team option on a second year or non-guaranteed. And in this case, you have neither. So this is what the compromise was. Obviously, like Melton's getting the money. He's getting more money than maybe others thought he would get. He got the most that he could get from any team that doesn't have cap room outside of a sign and trade, which can be problematic in its own way. So, but the mid-level itself is projected to grow to 14 million next year, 10%. Ooh. Okay. The cap will grow the max that it can, 10%. The Warriors can pay him a 20% raise. Ooh. So they can outpace the market at the mid-level. So if you say, well, who has money to spend? It's the teams with cap room. After the teams with cap room, it's the teams with the mid-level exception.
Right.
The alternative is the sign and trades can throw wrinkles, but the Warriors are the team that would decide whether or not they participate in a sign and trade. So they can pay him 14.1 anyone else can pay him 14.1. And so a team might be willing to give him 14.1 on a multi-year deal that outpaces what the Warriors will do in multi-years. So it's not like a given that it works out, but they at least at a starting point have the most at 15.4 to offer than anyone else.
Exactly.
Unless it's the Nets, unless it's the Wizards, or unless it's some other team that has the inclination to go after him to get cap room. Now, he was born in 98, so he's in the neighborhood of 26.
Correct.
So, yeah. So, like, if the Nets view him as like a cornerstone piece, maybe they use cap room. It's, to me, a stretch. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's the guy they go after. I think he's a role player. I think he's a good role player. Really, the question on him is health. Obviously, as you mentioned, he missed most of last year. It's a good signing. He's a good player. Everyone that you ever talk to likes De'Anthony Melton as a defensive-minded role player. He's not a true point guard necessarily. Like, he's not going to get you like 8, 9, 10 assists a game, but he can do his role. He can shoot. He's like a better Gabe Vincent in terms of shooting. He's kind of like what Gabe Vincent was in that Miami series, or at least helping Miami get to the finals. And that he's more of a Gabe Vincent has been a consistently bad shooter over the course of his career, but was like really hot for a stretch, and it was amazing. So I think like they're kind of similar, like 6'1", 6'2" guards with a solid body, about 200 pounds, who can defend and are tough and physical, and they'll set screens. Like, they're smart players. They're not guys who are like, I can only score, or I can only do one. Like, they could do a bit of everything. And he has playoff experience, and he played with the Sixers, was really good for them. He just was hurt. So
and
health
Memphis
is always the issue.
Right? Yeah. Well, and Memphis. I just said he also has playoff experience with Memphis.
Mm-hmm. He was good there as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. And final question. So, and that's great news on the Melton front. That means that in all likelihood, if this plays out in the perfect scenario where Melton is delivering and everyone's happy, odds are good. No guarantees, but odds are good that De'Anthony Melton could come back next year if the interest is mutual. Final question, Eric. I've had you for almost an hour, which is incredible. I thank you so much in advance for taking all this time out. And real fast, one more time, let's promote the business class, which you and ESPN's Bobby Marks are hosting. It's October 21st, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern. The website is sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Sign up, register. You might even see me in the audience there, the virtual crowd, because I'm sure I could learn a lot of stuff from this class as well. And it's free, folks. That's one of the best parts. Final question, Eric, and I'll let you go after this. I can't thank you enough again. Giannis Antetokounmpo was my dream, my fantasy this offseason, but it looks like I was maybe a year early in terms of Giannis growing, perhaps disenchanted, maybe a little disgruntled with the Milwaukee Bucks. There's a quote now. There's a quote. It's officially, the seeds are being planted, where Giannis said, if this is a bad year, the run might be over and maybe he might get traded.
Oh, it's already been over for a while, but that's
I agree. I'm just echoing what Giannis has been saying. I'm totally with you. The Bucks to me are cooked. What are the odds? Is it just a pipe dream? Is there an actual reality in this? This is where Kuminga would really come into play, of the Warriors getting Giannis Antetokounmpo at some point this year or next offseason.
Well, I mean, he makes the same money as Jimmy, right? So in terms of contract this year, both Jimmy and Giannis have a trade bonus. But they can only get a very small amount of it. I actually had Jimmy waiving his to make this deal happen, and Giannis would probably have to waive it as well, just to make it possible for the Warriors to do it. You could substitute Giannis in the article for Jimmy and build something similar. I'd have to go through and think it through. Like, they could get Wiggins and Kuminga, and that's less money than what Giannis is making. And then the extra salary is going to Detroit. And then you'd have to look at, who the filler pieces are. Is there a taker for Connaughton? Like, I haven't run this. Do they have to get out of Port? Like, there's other things they may have to do.
Did I just influence your next story?
I mean, we generally try not to hit on the same teams in like consecutive ones,
right,
but
right,
like,
no,
I'll definitely look at like what, now when Giannis extended, he extended because like ultimately he was going to get the max, and he was timing out his option, and with the new CBA, not this the end of this CBA that just started. It started in 23. It goes 6 to 7 years. So his timing is such that like he can decide what to do around the new CBA with his new deal. The Warriors don't really have to do, not the Warriors, the Bucks don't have to do anything because he has 3 guaranteed years left. And so like the option year, yeah, he could opt out and leave as a free agent in 27. You generally, when you have a star player, want to make sure you trade them before their final season, which is why like the Heat would be potentially trading Jimmy. So like I think the prime time to trade him is before the 26-27 season. My personal belief is that you want to trade someone before then when you have more leverage.
Exactly.
And so I would want to trade him if I'm the Bucks during the summer of 25-26. But almost no one has cap room this next summer. It may be very difficult. So I don't think they're going to do it now. You can argue like he pushes for a trade at some point, but he would have to go really hard. But like Dame did that in Portland. So like, who's to say that Giannis doesn't go hard and pushes for a trade? I don't know. It's going to take something heavy like that. And that's his personal decision to play the villain. And what we heard in the media and what he said, maybe a step towards that. I think he was going to get his money first, which he has. He's getting like guaranteed next year 54, the year after 50, almost 59 almost, and then an option the year after for almost 63. So he's getting paid. Does he want to be the villain now? I think the rule is that for a star player, you get paid. Like Luka, he's going to get paid his next deal with Dallas. Once he gets that, now he can decide to play the villain and to leave. Like they got to the finals, they may win championships. It may never come up. But if they stagnate, he may play the villain. And like Dame was really patient with Portland. He eventually played the villain later than he probably should have. Kevin Garnett, if you go back far enough, same thing. Took way too long to play the villain in Minnesota to get out and to go to the Celtics. So like there's a point where if you're in a dead end situation, like he's going to make 100 whatever million no matter where he plays. And some people don't care if they win. That's cool. If he cares and doesn't want to be in Milwaukee, wants to be on a place where he has a better. I look at that roster and like what they've done the last few years, and it's just not going anywhere. And I
Agreed.
I love Dame for who he's been and for even who he is today. I just thought like Drew is a championship point guard defensively, and Dame doesn't guard, and Middleton is not healthy anymore. He's not the same guy. Like he was great in the playoffs, but like it doesn't matter. They still didn't do anything in the playoffs, and Middleton isn't even healthy. So like that was the best that you were going to get from Middleton, and they were not good. And you could say, well, Dame wasn't healthy either. And like, I get that, but like they're at a point where they're all not going to be healthy. Lopez is older. I like Bobby Portis. He's not I don't think that like at this point, like he's not going to be the reason why they win or lose.
Exactly.
Connaughton's no longer productive. AJ Johnson, who they drafted, is some years away from being, and none of the young guys they brought, like they got Gary Trent and Taurean Prince and DeLon Wright. These are solid vets, but they're not going to be the reason why you win a championship. And I don't think that this is a championship team. So I do think this is headed towards some level of Giannis playing the villain. I just don't think it's going to be in time for the start of the season, but it may be something that we dig into leading into the trade deadline. I would love to ride that train of like, you know, figuring out where Giannis lands. That sounds like a lot of fun.
He might be playing a villain in Milwaukee, but he would be a hero here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I hope those. I've been throwing those seeds everywhere. Giannis to the Warriors is my personal dream. I try not to bring my fandom into this, but that excites me. Go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com. I'm going to share that poster one more time because it's unbelievable that you're offering this for free. It's a webinar. It covers the NBA. Bobby Marks. My guest here, Eric Pincus, talking extensions, final roster decisions. You can also learn more about the official full class that happens every summer during Summer League. I imagine you're going to be providing information there. And I'm guessing the fact that you will register for this, you'll be getting emails for the big class next summer, which is a springboard for a lot of people who want to get into this industry. And Eric, I can't thank you enough for taking time out again to join me. Anything else you want to promote? I know people can follow you on all social media platforms at Eric Pincus. Anything else before we go that you like to promote?
No, I mean, just sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Check out the webinar. If you are looking to get into the industry in some form, whether it's in media, learning the salary cap from Bobby and I, learning scouting video and analytics from incredible people. We really have a wonderful program, and we really get behind our students. And first, we got to get to know you. We just don't get behind you because you paid us money. We actually get to know you. It's not like sitting in an auditorium and you get a certificate at the end and you really just listened. And it's a very interactive program. It's a grind in the best way possible. We really push our students to learn, to come out of their shells, to because otherwise we can't, if we don't know who you are, we can't really get behind you. But we have people, I was just on the phone with somebody who's getting a job with the NBA itself, and he took the program, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and it took a while. Like, he's had opportunities. He did work for 2 different teams, but like wasn't really like a long-term fit. And so, yeah, like I'm there to help guide whatever I can do, give advice. And, he's we have people all over the place who work for teams. So I love that aspect of it. I've been fortunate. And so if I can pay that forward, and then you could always find my stuff on Bleacher Report, but really at Eric Pincus, Pincus, on X/Twitter I promote it on all different kinds of socials, not on Instagram enough. Unfortunately, my wife's always like, you got to take more pictures and whatnot. But but I do promote as much as I can. But usually that's the best way to do it. And, other than that, I'm going to Clippers tonight. I'll be going to Lakers opener. I'll be going to the Clippers opener, and occasionally travel and get a chance to see some games up north. Not as often as I'd like. But I love the arena over there. I love the Oracle as well. I have a lot of fun there. But I do enjoy the new arena as well. Got to see the finals there. So
we'll reach out if you're ever up here. I'll make the drive and catch up with you at Chase Center. Please let me know if you make the trip. Otherwise, again, people can follow you on all social media platforms, primarily Twitter/X at Eric Pincus, where they can get the latest on all of your fantastic content. And the seminar should be a fun time. Eric, thank you, brother. It's always a pleasure when you come on, and today was no exception to that. So thank you
I
again.
I got to start looking into Yannis to the Warriors. I got to work on that.
Thank you so much. Right. And for this program, we're back tomorrow night, Warriors-Lakers, I believe at Chase Center, to finish up the preseason. Will they go 6-0? We'll find out. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow night's Warriors-Lakers game will be the official the run that the team's going to do to kind of – it's the audition for the regular season. Most likely the starting lineup you see will be the starting lineup you see next week in Portland. You're probably going to get heavier minutes for the rotation players. In other words, a lot of the pieces of the puzzle will be revealed in the game. So Friday night's post-game show live right here should be a fun one. Should be an interesting one. We're going to break that game down and so much more. But thanks again to Eric Pincus. Thanks to everyone. And bye-bye.